Welcome back. Today we are gonna look at some super simplified basic principles of government. So in your government class, this is probably one of the first things you're going to learn is just the basic types of governments and how are they structured and how do they function, and not going into like any big details, just kind of the basic overall kind of formation in the different types of governments, because there are different categories, and it's kind of important what kind of government you live in, how it's structured, and how it works, right? So again, just kind of basic overview here of the basic kind of ideas and principles behind the formations of government, right? Not too bad. So governments, there are 5 types of governments, and some textbooks may change the number, as we'll see a little bit. Some may say there's 4. Some may go like really detailed and break things down into, maybe 6 or 7. But I'm going to go with 5 here because, as you'll see, you can pretty much fit most governments into these 5 types because they're very, very broad. The first type of government, which is something that all of us know if you've watched a Disney movie, right, is a monarchy. It's a government where the people are ruled by a king or a queen. And, most Disney movies have princesses and princes and stuff like that. Those are monarchies, right? So what does that mean? Again, all power, all control, all decisions, all laws comes from that person with the crown on their head. That person usually is special. In the past, they were, divine rule. They were chosen by God to be the leader, because I guess they were smarter and wiser than everybody else. Or it could just be as simple as, hey, my dad was king, and so now I'm his son. You will pass down rule onto the family. So it's like kind of a ruling family in charge. So that's a monarchy. Again, pretty simple. It's a person or family who rules, and they make and have all the powers of government, but it's just condensed down into whoever has, again, that crown on their head or who sits on the throne. Yes, Burger King, right, is an example, I guess, of a monarchy. He's the king of burgers. But don't see very many of these around today, but monarchies were extremely popular back in the past. Probably was the most common type a very long time ago. Today, not so much. I don't even know if there's any real monarchies anymore. If they are very few and far between. Oligarchy is the second type, and this is actually probably the most common type of government we have right now. An oligarchy is a government, oli means few, right? So there's a few people in charge. There's a few people that have power, a few people that make decisions. And sometimes we call this a dictatorship. There's little Kim from North Korea over there. And he would be an example of a dictatorship today. He has total power to kind of do what he wants, and I guess you could say run his country into the ground or shoot missiles off or do whatever. But don't think it's just him making those decisions. There is a group of people. North Korea is a communist country. And so those leaders of the Communist Party surround Kim, give him advice, help him to rule. He can't be everywhere at once. He can't do everything by himself. And so it's those elites. That's a good way of looking at an oligarchy, right? It's the elites that run and are in charge of that government. And in North Korea, if you're connected to Kim and his good graces, you're part of the elite ruling class, and so they are ruling the country. Doesn't mean that they're qualified. Doesn't mean they're always the best. It's just, maybe you know somebody, friend of a friend, you have connections. But again, it's a small group that rules. An oligarchy, a government of the few. Very common today. Most countries probably are oligarchies, or in the recent past have been oligarchies as well. Because it's very easy when you're in power to try and keep that power when you're part of the few that can kind of do what you want, right? Next, democracy. is also very common form now, but democracy is kind of recent. It's like the new kid on the block. Democracy is a government where the people rule. The people have the power. And the people vote and rule and make every single decision, right? Democracy is basically just voting. Are we going to go to war? Are we going to raise taxes? Are we going to, I don't know, sign a peace treaty with some other country? And in democracy, everybody would have a say in that. So everybody gets to vote on everything. It starts with actually ancient Greece. So way back in, ancient times, right? Greece, excuse me, Athens was a democracy. And as you can see in the picture there, what would happen, everybody would go to the polis, which is like the center of Athens, and they would vote on issues, right? Everybody had a chance to get up and kind of debate and speak their mind and give their opinion. And when everybody was done kind of arguing and debating issues, everybody was given a vote. And it was simple majority rules. Whichever decision got the most votes is what all of Athens would end up doing. So it doesn't matter if you were educated or not, homeless or not, everybody had a say. Well, except women, except slaves, but men. The men were able to vote. And back in Athens, it was very simply, they had like two baskets, a yes basket and a no basket. Everyone had like a little rock or stone with their kind of initials on it. And you would go to the ballot box and just kind of cast your stone in the basket you wanted to vote for. When it was done, they would turn the baskets over, count the little stones, and whichever basket had the most votes is what, again, everybody would end up doing. Democracy in its purest form. A republic comes a little bit later, right? A republic is a government where people vote, right? You still have that decision, but democracy, as you'll see, is very messy. It takes a long time if everyone is always voting on everything. Sometimes people aren't always qualified to make good decisions, right? For example, say you're voting on education, but maybe you're like a high school dropout or you're illiterate, right? Are you really the best person to be making decisions about that? Or say you're going to be making a big decision on like the budget this year or taxes. But again, maybe you're bad with money. Maybe you've bankrupted a couple businesses. Maybe you've got a hole in your pocket. You can't budget. Don't probably want that person making a big decision that affects everybody with budgets and taxes and stuff like that. So a republic, the idea is people vote, but what you do is you vote on people to make the decisions for you. You vote for people to vote in your place. Ideally, they are qualified, they have experience, and they are best suited to make those decisions, right? So that's a republic. You vote, but you vote for someone to represent you. It comes from ancient Rome. Rome liked the idea of voting, but they saw that it didn't really work very well. Democracies, they don't really last very long. They kind of fall apart over time. Mob rule and people voting and selfishly and not for the good of the whole. Democracy sounds good. It's not always great. So Rome tried to fix that again with a republic, kind of limiting the voting, I guess you could say, or putting the voting in the hands of responsible, ideally educated people who can make those best decisions for them. Today, India is a republic, probably the biggest republic around. But in India, people vote for representatives to go to the government, make decisions for them. That's what a republic basically is. Hopefully it sounds familiar. The fifth type is anarchy, which kind of some people won't put on the list, but I like to because anarchy is kind of important. Anarchy is very simple. It's just no government at all, right? Think of math. What is zero, right? Zero is it really a number? It's kind of just a placeholder, right? It takes up space for when there's no numbers there. Or black, if you're into art. Black is kind of like the absence of color, right? There's no color at all. That's how black works. Anarchy is the same thing here. It's kind of when government falls apart, when government isn't working, when there's just no government at all, you live in a state of anarchy. And that's not a good place to be. If you've seen those Purge movies, right? Basically, the Purge is all about anarchy for like one night a year, I think is how it goes. I hope it's only one night a year. Basically, there's no government, right? No police, no laws, and you can do and go as crazy as you want without any repercussions. That's anarchy. You'd be living the Purge 24/7 if that's the kind of state you were in. Not a good place to be, but there are anarchies around today. Certain parts of the world, like Syria right now, there's parts of Syria. There's a big civil war going on. It's going on for a very long time. But there's places, pockets in that country, in the Middle East, where there's really no government at all. And so it's kind of anarchy, right? And it's not a safe place to be. So I include anarchy on the list because, again, imagine you take 0 out of the number system, everything falls apart. Anarchy kind of has a place, and it's just kind of, it's our 0 on our government scale. Right? Okay, moving on. So, what type of government is the United States? You didn't see that, right? Think about it for a minute and think to yourself, I'll drink some coffee here, but what kind of government do you think the United States is and why? Of those 5, which are we? Not an anarchy. I'll make it easy on you. So out of the 4, which is the United States? All right, why do you think so? Interesting. So, if you said democracy, you're wrong. It's not. The United States, there we go. We are actually a republic, right? We vote, yes, but think about it. When we vote, usually, or when you're able to vote when you turn 18, usually, again, you're voting on people to go represent you in the government, in the federal, for senators and representatives and governors and mayors who are going to make those decisions for you. That's what the United States is. We love to say we're a democracy because we vote, and I know when you were in grade school, they told you that all the time. And again, it sounds good, and it's a nice thing to believe. But again, no, we're a republic because we just, very simply, we vote on other people who vote for us. So a fun trick I always tell my students is sometime today, tomorrow, whenever you get a chance, go and ask your friends, ask your parents, right? Aunt, uncles, whatever, and just ask them, give them a little quiz. What type of government do you think the United States is? 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to say it's a democracy because that's just what we like to tell ourselves. But they would be wrong, so you can gotcha them and say, actually, we're a republic because republics vote for representatives, and that's what the United States is. So, yeah, you go. You can trick them. You can sound smart. Okay. Last thing for today, very, very quickly. So now that we have the 5 types of government, those governments can all be structured in different ways, right? So you got your monarchies, oligarchies, democracies, republics, and anarchies. And in those, I guess not for anarchy, but for the first 4, power then, how is the power going to be structured, right? How is the government kind of set up? What's the blueprint for how we're going to build this government is kind of what we're talking about here. And this is very simple. There's basically 3 ways a government can be set up, right? We got unitary, federal, and confederacies. And it may sound a little confusing, but they're very, very simple ideas, right? So in a unitary government, very simply, all power is held by a single agency, a single group, a single organization, unicycle, right? One will, uni is one. So it's one group, one agency that has all the power. They make every decision. They enforce every policy. They make every law. They enforce everything. That's a unitary government. One, right? A federal government is what the United States is, right? We have kind of two governments that we need to listen to in the United States, if you think about it. We got the federal government in Washington, D.C., where the president and the Congress and the courts are, and they debate and talk about and make decisions that affects all 50 states. As an American, we need to follow the rules and laws of the federal government. But we also live in one of the 50 states. And so we also have to follow the rules and laws of the state that we live in. Our local state government also makes decisions that affects us. Now, I'm in Arizona, so the laws that are passed in Arizona don't affect people that live in California. And thankfully, the laws that they pass in California don't affect me in Arizona, right? So we kind of have to follow two sets of laws. That's what a federal government is. Power in the strong federal government that everybody listens to. But then we have local, smaller, more central governments like our states, and you could even go down further into like the city you live in, the county. We're not going to do that right now. But that's what federal government is. It's kind of layered, or it's structured, or a tier system. A tier, B tier, C tier governments. That's that. The last one is a confederation. And this is basically, it's kind of like an alliance, right? You got a bunch of small governments that are all doing their own thing, and they're kind of on the same team, and they kind of, when they need to or it's necessary or convenient, might come together to help each other out. But it's kind of every government for themselves. They just happen to be kind of on the same team, and they help each other out sometimes, but they have a lot of freedom and independency to kind of do what they want, right? That's what a confederation is. If you think of the Civil War, of course, the South is called the Confederacy because that's what their government was, right? Each state was kind of like its own country is the idea they were going for in the Civil War. And so each southern state was its own nation. Of course, they were on the same team because they were being attacked by the North. So there was a kind of an alliance of convenience there. But really, they all were doing their own thing, making their own laws. They didn't really communicate well. It's one of the many reasons the South lost the Civil War. They could never get on the same page because they were all doing their own things and fighting their own little wars, and that's a confederation, right? It's just small states and nothing else. I always tell my students there's a really easy way to remember this if you're taking notes or just to remember kind of a visual, right? Very simply, if you think of a unitary government, just think of one, right? One group, one organization has all the power. That's it. Easy. A federal government, you have a big, powerful government with a lot of smaller governments below it that make the laws and decisions and rules that everybody follows. And a confederacy is very simple. It's just a bunch of small governments doing their own thing with no really central organization to kind of steer the ship or tell them what to do. They just all do their own thing. That's a confederacy. And that's it, right? That's the 5 types of governments and the 3 ways that power is structured in them. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that was simple. These are, again, very basic ideas. There's a lot more detail you can go into, and you probably will later on. But for now, that's just the basics on how governments are structured. All right, cool. Hope that was helpful, and come back, and I'll see you later for some more stuff. All right, bye.